Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to the Rolling Stone, to the 43rd episode, if my math is right. I had to take off all my gloves and my shoes and socks to just get past 20, and now that we are over 40, I might be in a little bit of trouble. But there has been so much going on in the news this week, as usual, so let's dive right in. Our first story is about the Academy Awards because, as you might have heard, this past Sunday, the 92nd Academy Award was held in dear old Hollywood, USA. And I can't quite believe that something so trivial, almost, if that is a good word for it, has been around for 92 years. Because at the end of the day, what you're left with is a bunch of people whose job is to entertain us, the masses. And it's this group of people getting together and basically handing out awards to themselves. It's sometimes, if you really sit down and think about it, it's mind-boggling that something like that should have lasted for 92 years consecutively. And of course, I'm old-fashioned. I think that even when it was trivial, during the golden age of Hollywood, when you had people like Bob Hope and Fred Astaire hosting the Oscars, and people like Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, one of my heroes, Humphrey Bogart, winning awards. It was classy, it was stylish, it was fun. Trivial, of course, and really superfluous, but still fun. Those days are long gone now. Now it's very gaudy, very showy, glitzy, and of course, everyone has to make their political speech. Every time someone wins an award and goes up to the stage to accept their Oscar, they invariably make a speech, and it gets political. And in fact, that is specifically what this story is about. Because Joaquin Phoenix did the exact same thing. He followed protocol to the hilt. He won Best Actor. As you probably know, he won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of Joker, which, while I maintain it wasn't the Joker, he did a bang-up job in that movie. Very deserving of that award. But, as I said, his speech was laced, and I mean heavily laced, with politics, okay? So, he made the big nucleus of his acceptance speech about injustice. He said, quote, "I think at times we feel, or are made to feel, that we champion different causes, but for me, I see commonality. I think whether we're talking about gender inequality or racism or queer rights or indigenous rights or animal rights, we're talking about the fight against injustice. We're talking about the fight against the belief that one nation, one people, one race, one gender, one species has the right to dominate, use, and control another with impunity," unquote. He didn't go into specifics about what he meant by that, so it's very hard to judge what he is trying to say just off of the base of that. Now, some of these things, like queer rights, we know what that's code for. It means that if you think marriage is between a man and a woman, you can't say that, and if you do, you're a bigot. It means that if you think that there are only two sexes and that it's impossible for a man to become a woman or vice versa, and you say that out loud, or probably in the near future, if you just write that down in your diary, you've committed a thought crime, you're a hater, you're a bigot. And some of these things don't even exist, like animal rights, okay? And this is actually one of the things that he honed in on in the very next paragraph of his speech. Because after he said, we're talking about the fight against the belief that one nation, people, race, gender, species has the right to dominate, use, and control another with impunity, he continued by saying, quote, "I think we've become very disconnected from the natural world. Many of us are guilty of an egocentric worldview. And we believe that we're the center of the universe. We go into the natural world and we plunder it for its resources. We feel entitled to artificially inseminate a cow and steal her baby, even though her cries of anguish are unmistakable. Then we take her milk that's intended for her calf and we put it in our coffee and our cereal, unquote. Now that, right there, that has been the focal point of so much criticism against Joaquin Phoenix. So, the Wunderkind, again, Ben Shapiro, said on Twitter, quote, "I'm so glad the Oscars really targeted the fact that Hollywood just isn't woke enough. Nothing will put them in touch with the average movie-going American like wearing capes with victimized female directors and ranting about the evils of milk." That first one was in reference to Natalie Portman, who actually, attended the Oscars in a cape embroidered with the names of female directors who had been snubbed by the Academy because they weren't even nominated, those evil bastards. But specifically to get back to Joaquin Phoenix. So Ben Shapiro said that, Hollywood is now lecturing us about the evils of milk. According to the Washington Examiner, an actual dairy farmer, Tom Oberhaus, said in response to Phoenix's speech, quote, "We just wave it off and go, hey, ding dong, you don't have any idea what's going on out here at the farm. I mean, I'd love it if he'd come out here for a couple of hours. That would be awesome. That's an invite, Mr. Phoenix. Come on out. See what life is like on the farm," unquote. And I will say this, as far as I know, that is actually a valid point that Mr. Oberhaus said in that invitation that he gave to Phoenix. That is a legitimate point, because as far as I know, Joaquin Phoenix doesn't have much experience in farming. He doesn't have much experience in livestock farming. And neither have I when it comes out to it. I lived on a farm for 8 years with my family, but it was just crop farming, right? There was no livestock. My grandpa had gotten rid of those back in the mid-'80s, actually, after one of the floods. But that is something. I mean, a lot of these Hollywood actors who think that just because they are celebrities, or because they've read a little bit about something, or they've listened to a little bit about something, whether it's through CNN or whether it's because of a documentary or something, they suddenly think now that they are in possession of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and therefore they can come around and, proceed to lecture us about everything. Now, that's a legitimate point in and of itself. My big beef with that speech, and particularly the part about the cows, is that it is disgraceful, and I'll repeat that, it is disgraceful for Hollywood elites like Joaquin Phoenix to talk about cows the way he did, while abortion, just to pull one example, while abortion is still celebrated in this country, right? And like we talked about on the regular video, not on Tuesday, I was a day late, but on Wednesday, I posted it on Wednesday, where I said abortion is no longer seen as something that should be safe and legal, but rare, like it was promised in 1992. Now, of course, it is morphing into the cornerstone of democracy, one of democracy's cornerstones, like Jamila Jamil argued it was with Gloria Steinem. If you remember that way back last year when I made that video about that. When that is happening, okay, the cows are pretty far down on my list, okay? When, for example, the governor of Virginia, the sitting governor of Virginia, Governor Blackface Northam, says, in all seriousness, that it should be up to a mother and her doctor whether or not to give her baby who has survived abortion medical care. In other words, calling for infanticide. When the sitting governor of Virginia can say that, but still remain in office. When, for example, Democrats in the Colorado legislature voted to deny medical care to babies who have survived abortion, when they voted not to make it mandatory for hospitals to give these survivors of abortion medical care, when that can actually happen in your country, when, for example, as happened last year, the state of Illinois voted to get rid of the state's ban on partial birth abortion and then celebrated that vote and that decision. When that happens, okay, when you've got all that on one side, but a Hollywood golden boy like Joaquin Phoenix can make a speech about the evils of artificially inseminating a cow, and he can receive a standing ovation for that. We don't just live in a sick culture or a perverted culture. We are living in a culture that is virtually upside down. Feet are in the air, head is in the ground. Okay, and what of course happens when your feet are in the air and your head is literally in the ground? You're dying, you're suffocating, whether you realize it or not, right? And that's what this is a sign of. It's a sign that our culture is actually dying when you can have these two things on the same side. And a lot of these people are perfectly fine with that contradiction. I would bet, I don't have an actual guest list to compare and contrast the two, but I would bet that a lot of people who applauded Joaquin Phoenix's speech also applauded Michelle Williams' speech at the Emmys last month in January, where she credited her Emmy win on her abortion. She actually said that because I had my abortion, I was able to win this Emmy. And that's just a great and empowering thing. It's the same people, okay? That is what his speech actually shows me. However, just to muddy the waters a little bit, there was also a good part of that speech. It wasn't entirely bad. And ironically enough, it comes from the very same thing. Joaquin Phoenix actually talking about the abuses that happen in big farming, because regardless of the snark that Ben Shapiro might put out on Twitter, big farming has a lot of abuses in it. Okay? That is just a fact. Animals are treated very poorly. And in fact, I would go a step further and say that animals are treated very cruelly on a lot of big farms, right? On the big industrial farms, okay? Because when I say farms, I mean, we automatically think of the family farm, right? A farmer and his family who are tilling the land, raising their animals, etc., etc. We have a very, almost a pioneer image still, or probably a pioneer image that is Disneyfied, maybe even, but that's not the case. Ben Sixsmith, writing over at the American Spectator, writes that, a lot of these big industrial farms, their corporate headquarters are actually in foreign countries like China. Okay? So we're not talking about family farms anymore. We're talking big industrial farming complexes. Okay? And it is true that they treat their animals terribly because, like so much of big business, all they're concerned about is the bottom dollar. So, for example, they will pump beef cows and turkeys with steroids just to get them obesely fat, just to get as much meat on them as possible. Because, of course, the more meat that's on one animal, the more of a profit you're going to get. They will keep chickens cooped up in these tiny cages and just, never see the sunlight. They're sitting in their own filth and they're just, lay eggs, lay eggs, lay eggs. And as Ben Sixsmith, again writing at The Spectator, pointed out, there's animal abuse. I mean, if that's not bad enough, that is animal abuse in and of itself. But, for example, undercover journalists on some of these farms have recorded direct abuse of animals. So, Sparbo Farms in 2011, some of their workers were caught on video actually swinging live chickens in the air just for the hell of it. Workers at Fair Oaks Farm, workers there were captured on video actually beating calves, okay? So again, when I get after, like I did just a few minutes ago, about Joaquin Phoenix's speech, what I'm getting at is the hypocrisy, okay? I fully admit and believe and accept that animals are being mistreated. And again, even though animals don't have rights, because they don't, okay? There is no such thing as animal rights. Animals do not have rights. But at the same time, that does not give people carte blanche just to treat them any way they damn well please. We as people have a responsibility to treat animals humanely. Okay? To treat them as actual living beings. That doesn't mean that we have to build gilded thrones for them. That doesn't mean that we don't have to eat them, okay? But it means treating them with kindness, treating them with, if you want to use the word, dignity and respect. Don't just see them as a cog in the machine for your profit or for your own personal gain or pleasure, okay? Don't see that. And really, that's something that I would like. I would like that mentality to be seen throughout the right, honestly, all over the conservative side. After Phoenix made that speech last Sunday night, Monday, even going a little bit into Tuesday morning, I saw a lot of people on the right critiquing him. Some of them brought up the dichotomy that I just spoke of before, oh, we're not supposed to treat cows like this, but killing babies, that's fine. Like the Penguin in Batman Returns, kill the babies. And they are right again to bring up that dichotomy, but at the same time, isn't there enough room in our heads to actually be able to have both? To be able to condemn the hypocrisy, but also to be able to admit that no, we actually need to reform big farming. We have to stop the abuse of animals that is also happening. Work to save the babies and work to save the animals too. There should be enough room on the right and enough room in our own minds to be able to do both, to have both thoughts, okay? And not to be ideological, okay? Not to be ideological on the right to say that because Joaquin Phoenix talked about the evils of artificially inseminating a cow, and because Joaquin Phoenix is a crazy Hollywood leftist woke celebrity, that means that my position is contradictory to his, which means that I'm taking the side of the big farms, the big industrial farms, no matter what. No. There should be enough room in our minds to condemn Joaquin Phoenix's speech for the hypocrisy, and also to applaud it and to recognize the good that's in it, and that, yes, animal abuses do happen. So really, this is kind of a call and a test to see if the right can actually in this specific instance, to actually have a broad mind, to actually have both good things in their heads at the same time. But anyway, that is story number one.